Hello, Ellisville State School. I am going to do a really quick processing video here. So what I've done, I've got all of my lines that have come in here. So we made 50 passes. All of them were about 40 to 50 meters long. Here's the construction of our data together. So just some background here really quick. We're looking at the UTM zone. It's Universal Translocator Zone 16R. Which is where you are located in Mississippi. I can turn on my satellite here to let you know, so you kind of see a visualization. So here's our cemetery around the outside. There's the road that we drove in and where we're located. So you can see we covered the entirety of the cemetery. I was able to offset the antenna that I had is about 1.5 meters off the ground. We also only recorded if we had fixed signal, which means that we're having the high quality signal coming in. And then I can also do a 3D topo correction here, which means for the undulation of the topography that goes up and down. But I wasn't really concerned about that for this type of a scan. So really we're just looking at depth underneath the surface. So surface depth as we move around. So there's going to be a little bit of a curvature going down the hills, but it's the depth from that point is what we're looking at. So there's our position located. So we can run over here and I can run a lot of processes, including filtering out any bandwidth noise. These little lines that are coming straight up here are signals that are frequencies that are hitting between 100 megahertz and 500 megahertz, and this is where I chose to run my signal to cop out any of the low signal and the high signal in the actual processing data here. But we run a lot of different bands through here, and so our time zero is going to eliminate the noise that's right there at the surface between the grass and the plastic. And so we're getting on the actual depth here. We can also come in here and do a transformation in this little critter right here as I move this around. This has already been calibrated. So here's my hyperbola of the object that I'm looking for, and you can see that it spreads out and contracts based upon what its depth is. And so this allows me to find out what that signal return is and the depth of the actual object. So here we have two burials that are relatively at the same depth, so they're just a little bit off. Here's our meter, so there's 1 meter down to 2 meters here. And so if I see if I can, well, let me grab this thing here. So I can flare it out there, and I'm not going to run this new one here. So if I move that down here, you can see here's at depth. So we've got somebody who's actually buried about almost 1.5 meters down, and these guys are buried about 3/4 of a meter down, and that's pretty typical. And again, that's from the surface of the ground there. And so you're looking at my calibrated signal through my gain. This is the sounds that I'm hearing coming back because they've been calibrated. So the object we're looking at is right where my pointer is, and then you can see on the screen where it's actually located. So we could go in here and mark each one of these as we found them, but we were running this particular process to look at which graves were marked and which graves were unmarked. So these are really strong signals here. Here's my Hilbert transformation, which removes these hyperbolas and then gives me the signal of the object that we're looking at. So here's the deeper burial right there, and then here's the shallower burial. This is showing a slice, so this is my depth scan. And right now we're looking at a thickness of almost 0.2 meters wide, and so this gives me a slice of the earth, and it's going to let me know if there's any signal there. So we were looking straight down at each one of these objects as we're moving across. So this lets me to look horizontally. And then I can verify a lot of these things back here outside of the lab. So we're looking at here, and I can slide this up. I've got it locked. So there's the surface up there, and we're going to, some noise on the very surface down there. You can see on the southern part here. And that's coming from, it's really wet down there. So there's a water signal coming in. But once we get below the water signal here, and I can show you an example. As we move down, you can see these light blue areas are where we believe there's people interred. So these are high confidence levels where we're leaving flags if there was no markers. So right here, we can see there's this object there, and there's this other one right next to it. I'm zoomed out pretty far, but you can actually see these guys are located there and there. And this is what their Hilbert transformation looks like. So these are very indicative of burials off on this side. And if we look down over here, we've got a deeper one. There's our object. It's a pretty large object down here. But my hyperbola looks a little bit different as we get down there. So if I move my line, this is this yellow line in this particular software, as I work my way down to where those guys are located, so where that individual is located in this case, I can come down here, and now that's exactly where the target is. So you can see we're moving here, and here's how many meters along my particular line that we're moving. And so as I move along, this was a transverse, a line that was running to the south. So basically I did a north, south, back and forth, little bounce back a little bit, like this part of the line was lost probably because we didn't have a good enough fix. So the same thing up underneath the trees, and then there were some objects over here, so we didn't get that part. But everything else we ran back and forth, about a half a meter apart in each one of these passes, which is a lot further than I like for 3D models, but we weren't really looking for 3D models, we were looking for objects. So a half meter means that we should catch anybody. You know, a casket's going to be at least a half meter long, and even child caskets should be at least half meter long. We should be able to catch all of those as we move through it. In order to do a proper 3D model, we have to run about a 0.25 or 0.3 meters across, which would have tripled the number of passes necessary in that, and it would have been an all-day venture. So it takes quite a while to cover these areas here. So I wanted to do a recording here, and I'm going to get this up so you guys can look at it when you want. But again, so I run through my process here. So we're looking at various objects, and again, here's our burials are located here and here. And as we come down, the ones at depth are showing up now as we're down here lower. So these are the guys that are all buried at about 3/4 of a meter down. These are all the people that are about just a little bit deeper than that, coming all the way down to roughly the 2 meter mark. So it's about here that we start picking up some more ground noise underneath. So some of the deeper locations here. And what we're also going to see is some of these colors on the top, they stay light blues because the signal, once the signal comes from the surface, we've registered that signal, and sometimes we can get an echoing or a noise underneath it that remains. Here's a good example. There's not objects underneath this. This is, we hit our main target object, and then we're getting a residual effect from it. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed my little overview of what we did out there. Again, if you have any questions, just don't hesitate to ask. My email is david.h.holt, Holt, @usm.edu. And hooray, hurrah for that.